So to kick us off, I'm going to invite Mayor Tim Keller to give a few remarks.
Okay, so, all right, so folks, I know, look, it's hot, so I get the shade. I see a lot of our counselors back there and whatnot. You can come closer if you want. That's why there's kind of this tent here, so you're a little closer, but mostly we're going to hear from the family. And Councilor Pena requested that Elaine Romero share a few words, so we're going to hear from her too. But I'm just, before we kind of officially get started, the reason why we're standing here is for a reveal up there. So just want you to know, like, why we're baking in the sun right here. And so when we're ready, we do want everyone to get out there for that, and we'll work on that. So I think with that, let's go ahead and actually get started here. And I want to begin by sharing a couple of things. Look, first and foremost, we're gathered here to rename the Daytona Transit Facility the Ken Sanchez Transit Facility. And this for us comes on the heels of a lot of different aspects we're trying to do at our city and what he believed in, but also this concept of the stories of us, which is our city's effort to name and remember and honor people who have done amazing things for our city or our community. Not necessarily public servants, folks from all walks of life, even volunteers and so forth. But we're using this as yet another example of the stories of us. And I think some of you may remember this was part of the State of the City. This was also part of renaming Juan Jose Pena Plaza down at Bareilles Community Center. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that program as well. So first off, I do want to welcome our counselors that are able to join us today. I know I saw Councilor Grout give us a wave. There she is. I think I saw Councilor Sanchez come around, Councilor, and then of course we have Elaine Romero. And former Councilor Oz. Come on and get some shade. Former Councilor Lancena also here. And so welcome and thank you all for being here for this. We also have a bunch of transit staff who work here each and every day on behalf of us as public servants, and so we want to thank them, and we're going to hear a little bit about that role from our director here in just a minute. So I think let me share a couple of things. First and foremost, on the fun stuff. If you drive down the freeway, every New Mexican, if you look just to the south, every New Mexican is going to remember Ken Sanchez. That is awesome. And for those of you who are I'm talking about the signage on the north end of this building that faces the freeway. And I mention that because I want to start with Ken. Look, he and I, we've had, I think, many chances to talk about Ken and to remember him and to honor him, including the fire station. But I want to share a couple of aspects of this. Number one, Ken was a believer in public transit. In a way that was never about politics. It was about who he was as a person and what he believed a city should provide. And I will tell you, transit, as the transit department will tell you, they don't always have like a lot of supporters who are elected officials. I mean, they're frankly usually in the crosshairs and taking a lot of criticism. Ken was a defender of public transit and of the workers, of the drivers each and every day. He would ask me every time we talked about the budget, he would ask me about transit driver pay. And, that is hundreds and hundreds of folks who work at the city each and every day, often thanklessly, and they have to deal with, unfortunately, sometimes the worst of Albuquerque, whether it's crime, whether it's theft. They have to, in the olden days before we had the security gates, right? They physically had to deal with it. Believe it or not, we ask so much of our transit drivers, and we never recognize them. But Ken always recognized them, and he always advocated for them. And that's one important reason why we want to dedicate this facility to Ken. It's also a dedication through him to the drivers, the ones who drive every one of these buses that you see in the lot each and every day. And we know these are, they're sort of blue collar, typically entry-level jobs. We understand that. But that doesn't mean that they're by no means just as important as all the other roles in the city. And so I want to thank Ken for reiterating that every chance he got, and also making sure that I never forgot that as mayor. I also know that Ken helped build this facility, so that's not lost on anyone either. This was a massive lift earlier on in his career under different mayors when this was built, and this facility actually really transformed public transit in Albuquerque. It made it truly citywide by putting it out here on the west side. It fixed all sorts of route problems on the west side, and it said that our city is one Albuquerque, the west side and the east side together. And until Ken and others who fought for that stood up for that, there was a real inequity, a real imbalance with much more transit over on the east side. And so yet another one of Ken's many legacies was essentially unifying the city through public transit and saying that we're one Albuquerque, and yes, we do need two transit facilities, one on the east side and one on the west side. And lastly, we all now, I think, can hopefully smile a little bit about the art project. But I'll tell you what, that project, I do know for future generations, if not this current generation, that was ahead of its time. It took visionary leadership, and Ken was at the forefront of that. There is no way we would have had that project without Ken. But what's so amazing about Councilor Sanchez is he was also so honest about the challenges. He knew that it was going to be hard to implement. He knew that it was going to take a while. He knew that it was an investment in the future. He wasn't actually sort of selling it as sizzle to use, since we have some representatives from Max La Sierra here too from the family. He was in it for the steak on that one, not for the sizzle. And I think that's also the same reason why we kept it when I came in. It was because Ken said, look, let's really talk about public transit here and not about campaigns or flashiness and all of this other stuff. This is about a better transit route up and down Route 66 and honoring also in many ways that heritage of Route 66. Yet another amazing legacy of Ken Sanchez. So with that, let me wrap up my remarks by just saying a little bit about our Stories for Us project. It's easy to tell stories and honor Ken, and it's a credit to him because he did so much. But we know that all across the city of Albuquerque, there are other stories of folks, and they may still be alive, they may still be with us, they may be at the end of their career or sort of the sunset of their life, or they may not be. But the point is, we believe in sharing these stories. And so we want to make sure that in ways big and small, we share our stories. And part of that is also making sure that we own our city in terms of even things, simple things like the names of our buildings. Why was this called Daytona Transit? I mean, I think the street was sort of named after like a racing theme, and it was really about Daytona 500. Someone can correct me if that's wrong, but, and I think this is also something that Ken and Clarissa, who's not here, when we can, right? The names of the places around us should reflect the people who live here and the people who do good work here. And that's what the Stories of Us is all about. Yes, sometimes it's a former legendary city councilor, that's true. But also sometimes it's a community advocate. Sometimes it's a volunteer who just helped with dog parks, and so we'll rename the dog park. Sometimes it's just somebody who is a volunteer at the reception desk over at Los Volcanes. So at that lobby, we're gonna honor their story and tell their story in that lobby. So you are gonna see us continue to do this in ways big and small, where we take a generic name and actually make it specific to us. That's why it's called the Stories of Us. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our transit director for more on this, Leslie Keener. Come on up.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon. So Ken was indeed a sincere supporter of transit, as Mayor quite pointedly pointed out, and he quite regularly helped us with financial support and promoted transit and ABQ Ride by working with other government agencies to integrate transit into their communities and into our community. Ken Sanchez helped initiate significant impacts to ABQ Ride and further the reach and impact of public transportation in Albuquerque. This also did include the implementation of ART and the development of the Central and Unserved Transit Center, the CUTC that's just to our south here. I'm very grateful for everyone who had a role in turning this idea to honor an individual who fought really hard for improved public transportation in Albuquerque and helped to turn that into a reality. A big thank you goes out to Signplex. Shelley's here from Signplex for their partnership on this project. They were able to incorporate, as you'll see here shortly, a bright and colorful design that exuberates Ken's character and legacy on the dedication plaques, as well as the other signs that are outside the building. The photo taken by Kim Ju is a key element in bringing this piece together, and the beautiful biography provided by his family showcases Ken's lasting impact on our community. Not only are there signs on the north, south, and east-facing sides of this facility, there's also 2 plaques that have been placed at both the operations building, which is right here, and the maintenance building, which is right to the north. They will help to display Ken's impact to this facility going forward. So with that, we're extremely grateful that we have this opportunity to dedicate these buildings here that was once formerly known as Daytona and turn it into the Ken Sanchez Transit Center. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Ken's daughter, Jacqueline Sanchez, so that she can say some words about this facility. Hello, thank you guys for having us today. This is quite an honor. So on behalf of the Sanchez family, I'd like to thank Mayor Keller, his administration, all of the transit department, Leslie Keener, for making my father's name a legacy here at the transit center. I have a confession to make. I was here last night. I drove through because I want to make sure I was here on time. So I kind of creeped past the parking lot, and I didn't expect to see these big, beautiful signs out here on the building, on the sidewalk. And it was very emotional. One, because every time we had family in California, so we'd make a road trip once a year to California to visit my aunt and uncle. And we'd be driving back on 40 and along, of course, listening, my brother Stephen can attest to this, but listening to Amarillo by Morning for the 8th hour of our road trip from my dad singing at the top of his lungs. We knew when he started singing Jimmy Glaser, and you'll know that song, it's The Lights of California, or Lights of Albuquerque. And as soon as we heard that song, we knew we were almost home. And it was right over this highway here, which was incredible to see that. Public transportation has really been a big deal to my father. We'd always go on basketball trips, road trips with my kids, and he'd want to go, first thing, let's go see public transportation, let's go see what they have downtown, let's go see what it looks like. We'd head over, we'd be complaining because we'd be hot, cold, waiting for the bus, the nearest subway, the nearest streetcar to take us somewhere, or packed in a New York City, DC subway. But knowing that you look over and you see my dad, and he was happy as can be, sitting there, with his phone, talking on the phone, listening to music, doing whatever he wanted to do. You knew he was so happy to not be driving, not paying extra cab fare, but he was happy to be riding the public transportation and experiencing it and seeing what he could bring home to Albuquerque. If we could do something like that here, if it was translatable to the city. And a lot of times it was, sometimes it wasn't. But it was wonderful. And a lot of times my dad's really good friend, Dwayne, who works for transit, was with us. He drug along all those trips with us. But the one thing he would do, and he always did, is public transportation was a great opportunity, he said, to make friends. So within 5 minutes, he was always best friends with the person sitting right next to him. So I just want to thank all of you from the bottom of our hearts for honoring my father in one of the most fitting and honestly one of the coolest facilities in Albuquerque, I believe. And according to him, he said that right here at Transit possess some of the best employees in the city of Albuquerque. And I know he'd be honored to have his name on your building. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I really, really appreciate that. And, like I said, Mayor Keller, this is a huge honor. Thank you. I know this was really important to you to have, and it's amazing. I thank him and, for memorializing his name and really making him part of the lights of Albuquerque. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Jacqueline, Mayor Keller, and Director Keener. Last but not least, we're going to bring up Elaine Romero. She was Councilor Sanchez's policy analyst. So, Elaine, if you want to come up and say a few words.
Wow, those are words hard to follow. I promised Jacqueline last night and myself this morning that I wasn't going to cry, and I'm doing good thus far. I had the honor of working for Councilor Sanchez for over 16 years, and everything that the mayor talked about in his support for public transit, all of our public workers, holds so true. Councilor Pena asked me to say a few words on her behalf, as she was unable to make it today but wanted to be here. Ken and Clarissa really did support public transit together as a whole. I know our councilors continue to do that. Ken and Clarissa called me one night after a city council meeting that ended, I think at like 9 o'clock, said, hey, we're going to take the bus home. I said, oh, okay, well, what about your cars? You might have to bring us in the morning for them because we want to take the bus home with the other folks that are going home this late as well. I can't tell you how many times our late Councilor Ken Sanchez would pull things like that. To understand what our drivers were going through, what our riders were going through, what improvements were needed, and like Jacqueline mentioned, just to make new friends. Mayor, thank you for this honor, for my late boss, and for the family I consider mine, the Sanchez family. You mentioned everyone coming up and down the freeway will know who he is. Please, everyone, let his legacy live on. He loved this city more than anything. And to Councilor Pena, who was one of his best friends, thank you for always working with him.
All right, so Mayor Keller and the family and all of our speakers, counselors, if you all want to come up, we're going to count down from 5 to finally reveal the brand new sign. So if you all want to join us up here.
I love these guys. We see you up there, fellas. I know it's hot. We'll try and go fast. Come on over. I think. Where do you want us? How close do you want us?
Camera phone? Yeah.
Yes.
Family.
Tell us when.
Sanchez family.
You might blow under the street. I know, New Mexico, right? Like the wind, out of nowhere. So I'll stand back, kind of scoot a little bit, so Councilor be a little, do the height thing. So hop in front, feel appropriate. Councilors, you should hop in. Eileen, you were a councilor when we started, so might as well. And look, whoever else wants to join. So Transit Department, there's not anyone who wants it. Bobby, come on. Mike. Drive by the highway on the way home. Take an extra exit. Yeah, back around.